Hey, it's Jared from Coda. In this video, we're going to take a look in Gatsby at what the data looks like when we source it from Sanity. In the very first video of this kind of mini-series or tag-along adventure of building this all out, we set up the Gatsby source plugin for Sanity, and we saw that with that basic little fast fact thing that we made, that we were able to query all of those things inside of our Gatsby project. Now, we've made a lot of progress, and so I think it's going to be interesting to see how much power we have, even just with the little things that we've done so far in Sanity. That, relatively speaking, is a very small amount of work. So the first thing that you want to make sure that you do is make sure that you run Sanity deploy to deploy all of your schema changes to the hosted instance, and that you are able to publish all of that content that you might have loaded locally. The other thing that you're going to want to do is run Sanity GraphQL deploy to make sure that all of your new schema changes are accessible in Gatsby's source plugin the way that you have just set them all up on your local machine. So I've already done those, and I've already CD'd into my web directory here, which is the Gatsby project that we set up. And so now I'm going to go ahead and run Gatsby develop. Once your development server is running, we can go ahead and open up localhost 8000. And now, spoiler alert, this is already done. Everything in here is hard-coded, but we ran out of time recording videos and we needed to get the landing page up. But all of this stuff is currently hard-coded, and so while we do have the front-end styles and things all put together, we will be working back up to this point using data from Sanity and showing you how to style this as well. So don't worry too much about that at the moment. So now if we head back into graphical and give that a good refresh, you can see all of our sweet new data here that we didn't have at the end of the first video and that we have created in Sanity. Now I went through and loaded the actual content for the home page, or just about all of it anyways, to come in and find the data that we need in order to start creating pages and pulling content into pages. And so we can just run through real quick some of these different things. And so if we were to maybe grab the All Sanity page, now traditionally things always run through edges and then node. A nice little shortcut is just to drop down to nodes. We can grab the titles and the slugs.current. And so we can see off the bat, we have a null slug, and that's because there's no slug on a home page, but we do have a title of Coda. And so that's pretty cool, and that's actually just about all we need to start creating pages. However, just to show you real quick, we have access to all of these other things we created as well. And so while it may have felt like overkill to have all of these random things as top-level documents, there are some really cool things that you'll be able to do with this in your Gatsby site when the data is accessible in this manner. And so, for example, say once the blog is up and we want to create route-based filtering and things like that for shareability and things like that, we will have access to create pages and ultimately then query for things based off of these tags that we have at the top level. So that's pretty fun. We also have this social as well that you can see, and we can get all of the information that we have loaded in right now. Which I need to toss in a couple more, but we have it, and that's pretty cool. And so if we come into we have the slug and the title, and then in here, there's a few ways that you can access all of the information that we're going to need. And so one of the things that we will need is the title and the description and the image for all of these different open graph things. And so this is, maybe if you remember the if you remember the open graph stuff that we set up, we have it. And I went in and loaded in all this content. And so you can see that based off of this, we can open this up. We have a nice social image and a title and description and all of that social stuff that we are going to need. We'll go ahead and pocket that, though we don't need it at the moment. I'm just showing you where everything is. So what I like to use with Gatsby in particular, and you're not always going to want to use this because there are potential performance implications, but one thing that the Gatsby source plugin provides you is this raw content field. You can resolve references. I just leave it at the default 10. And something pretty crazy is going to happen when we run this, but I think you'll see the value in it pretty quickly. So when you run through the raw content, this provides you one array of all of the different pieces of content inside of the Sanity document. And what's really cool about this is this allows us to pass in just this one raw content property and then ultimately go into our page template, and we have access to all of the data from the entire page. And so when I say performance implications, that's because if you weren't using a static site generation method like maybe Next.js with a static export, or Gatsby in our case, this is a lot of extra data. But most of this stuff is going to end up being tucked away and forgotten about when we build our static bundle, and ultimately our first packet that we ship to the browser isn't going to contain all this extra fluff. It's just going to contain the things that we need rendered as static HTML. And so it's nice in development to go ahead and pull all these things into the page template. And I personally am yet to develop a site, and we've developed some pretty big ones using raw content that I noticed any kind of performance implications during development using this method. So I like to just get access to all of it up front, and then we can go through, and as you can see, we have this array to map over, and we have everything that we would need. And so I think the first thing that I want to do is maybe set up in Gatsby just to create this first page. And what I actually think that I want to do, just to kind of get the point across, I suppose, is let's go into our published Sanity instance, and let's add another page just for demonstration purposes. And again, this is just a landing page right now, so we don't actually have a second page, but we'll go ahead and add back in our hello world page. We'll create the slug, and then we'll just add a hero in here, just so for demonstration purposes, we have something here to work with. And so if we publish this, and then we come back, we are going to need to restart our development server. I don't have any live preview or anything set up like that. Don't worry about this. This is just my node version. It has a weird flag on pretty much every single node process. I just need to update it. But this will finish here in just a second. And once our server is back up and running, we can come back into graphical, and now we'll delete this. For now, we don't really need it, but we'll bring back in our slug.current, and now you can see that we have both pages here. And so these are the things that we're going to need, as well as our ID, and I think that's all we need. So I'll go ahead, just because I'm a little picky about the way this gets brought in, we will bring in our data in this correct order. And so we'll go ahead and copy and paste this query code right here, and we'll just hang on to that for a few minutes. And so now if we come into our web directory or our Sanity project, we are going to need a new file to make this page. And so we could say gatsby-node.js. Whoops, it needs to be in here. And so the first thing we're going to need is we are going to need a node module, require path. And so Gatsby, if you're not familiar, there's a lot of excellent information that I'll link to in the description about their documentation, but they have this create pages function. And so this is going to be an asynchronous function that will take in a few things as properties. So we have access to this GraphQL as well as actions. And now Gatsby, just for a fun piece of information, if you're familiar with Redux, they have this thing called actions. And during the page creation of this, and you can read more about it in their documentation, Gatsby uses Redux under the hood to manage some of this stuff and some of these node processes. So we are able to destructure the GraphQL actions that we have globally accessible during this process off of this to use in the function. And so now we can go ahead, we're going to destructure a couple of things from those actions. We're going to want the create page, we just need the one, sorry. We're going to destructure the create page method off of our actions. And so now we can come in and we are going to use the GraphQL that we pulled in, and we are going to await GraphQL, and this is going to be backticks, where we will have a query. And now this is going to be that query that we wrote out in Sanity. And so essentially all this function is doing so far anyways is saying, hey, we want to make sure that we have access to create a page, and hey, the result is going to be equal to the awaited value of this GraphQL query. And now from there, you can do some fun things, and this is GraphQL, not specifically, I guess, Gatsby, but we can alias this to be pages, and I just like that just so that way I don't have to say, hey, you know, result.data.nodes, whatever. You can just say, hey, here's our pages. And so the next thing that we do, and I'll go ahead and add a comment, is just say that we are going to create our pages off of that. And so if we were to come into our result.data, and so the resulting thing that comes back here will have data in there. So we do have to kind of come down on it, but this is where, again, this is where the alias would be. Typically this result would be result.data.allSanity page, and that would be an array for this allSanity page. And so if you come into graphical, you can see what I'm talking about, is the result of this query will pass us back data, allSanity page, nodes. We can come in and say straight into pages. And so on the pages.nodes, we will perform a for each loop. And so inside of this, we can pass in to each iteration the page. And so this is something that I haven't found a great solution for. It's not a big deal, but for defining the slug that you then pass into the create page function, I typically come in and I find the page.slug, and if that exists, then I set the slug to be equal to the page.slug.current. Otherwise, I just set it to the /, which will be, in this case, our home page, and in the other one, it will end up being hello world. Because as you can see here, our slug is null for the home page. And so this is just an easy way for me when you have a lot of different things coming in here and you want to maybe decide what types of taxonomies and things, getting in the habit of defining slugs before you get into the create page function rather than performing this logic inside of that. It's just something that I've found helpful. So now we have access again to this create page that we destructured from actions. And this is going to be where the magic happens, so to say. And so the path to this page is going to be equal to the slug that we set. And so this slug will be equal to the path that ultimately will be accessible in our browser. Now we can set the component to what? And this is where it gets a little bit tricky. It's kind of a Gatsby thing, and I say tricky, it's really clear. They have a great tutorial in their documentation. Right now, everything is just running out of these pages, and they have page and folder-based routing. But what we need to do is hop in here and create a templates directory where we will create a file called page.jsx. And for right now, let's just export a const of page. Let's call this page template. And then we will export default page template. And so in here, we'll just say hello from a page template. And so now we have access to this page template because we have this path property. We can reference that inline here by path.resolve, throw in some backticks, and we'll say source templates page.jsx. And so essentially what this is doing is saying, hey, create the page at this route and then use this component wherever that page happens to be. And so for now, all those pages are just going to say hello from a page template, but we can pass in something called context. And this is another little bit of Redux fun, I believe. And this is something that we are able to pass into this page component by what's called context. And so once we have the results from this ID here, these IDs are going to be referenced to the document itself. As you can see, we are querying onto the page document, and they all have a unique identifier that we will be able to pass in as a query parameter inside of this page to find the content that we need based off of the ID. And so here we can just, we can pass in the page underscore ID, and that's what we need. And so now we will have to come back and restart, and it gives you a nice little warning here to tell you that, but it's going to tell you that you need to restart your development server. So we can go ahead and rerun Gatsby develop. And once that runs, we can hop back into our browser. And if we come over here, we should be able to, if you just throw in a random route, Gatsby will give you a list of all of the pages that it currently knows about. And so here you can see that we have this hello world. And funny enough, we have this here. And so if we come over to hello world, you can say hello from a page template. And so this is sort of a gotcha situation that has happened to me a couple of times. Is by default, the prioritized route is always going to be what you have locally in your page directory. And so if you have an index file here, that is always going to take precedence over this node process's determination of what the home page should be. And so if we come into this and we'll just say, I don't know, we'll say home old or something like that. And then we come back, we will have to rerun Gatsby develop. Once that runs successfully, now you can come back and you can see that at our base route of just a single slash, we have hello from a page template. And now you aren't going to have to restart the server for every single change that you make. It's just when you change things in these Gatsby specific files like Gatsby browser, Gatsby config, Gatsby node. Those are things that Gatsby is going to have to recompile to figure out. And so if we were to change that over here, for example, you could see we have hot reloading and all those things right back in action. And that's all it takes. So now, based off of that page builder situation that we have, we can take this ID and in the page template, we can write a GraphQL query that says, hey, Mr. Sanity, in any instance that you see this ID or this document ID, give me back the information that we ask for. And so that's what we're going to do in the next video, is run through how, using this ID, we are able to pass in a GraphQL query parameter to pull in the data that we need to go ahead and get our page builder up and running.